It's Monday night, and you know what that means. The Jersey First Television Network proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And certainly, I am the generational talent in Garden State Media, and I'll continue to be your leader for trustworthy opinion journalism. That's right, folks. It's me, Fernando Uribe. Happy April. Hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend and a great Passover as well. And so I want to thank you all for tuning in and making this a part of your Monday night viewing and tuning in, of course, from wherever and however you may be doing so right now on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on LinkedIn, on Instagram, as well as on Jersey First TV, whether you're watching on YouTube, and of course, all of your social media platforms, as well as on X. And folks, I cannot say enough. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment, make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and X, and certainly make sure you subscribe to Jersey First TV on YouTube. And whether you get your podcast on Spotify or SoundCloud, check out Jersey First. Take it with you as the days are a little bit warmer. They're a little bit sunnier and longer with more daylight, whether you're walking your dog, you're doing some grocery shopping. Hey, maybe just, buying some leftover, Easter candy on clearance. Trust me, I'm sure you have your smartphone with you or your tablet. Check out Jersey First. Trust me, you'll never regret it. And folks, I can't say it enough. Once again, Jersey First TV leading the way here, educating and advocating here for our residents in the great state of New Jersey. Folks, nobody does it better than Jersey First TV. Of course, brand new episodes of Real Talk premiere every Monday night. Check your local listings for start times. And of course, brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap also are online with the Jersey First Television Network. Folks, check it out. And again, all it takes is a few seconds. Like, comment, and share. It really helps the show grow. It really helps the show with the algorithm. And of course, it shows your support for fearless independent media here with Real Talk. Folks, you want to stick around for final thoughts. I'm going to have a lot to say about some of the usual bad actors that we see in New Jersey, whether it's in academia. We know, as I've said before, whether it's beta males like Joy Medidas with over there at the Center for Cooperative Media, at Woke State over there in Montclair, or of course, useless government electeds, whether it's like people like Katie Brennan and Robbie Bala, Phil Cohen, Joe Quintero, you name it, or like do nothing, paper pushing, apple picking government employees like Maria Rodriguez and others, or useless journalists, folks like Alan Steinberg and Tom Moran. Of course, as I mentioned before, Charles Stile and Matt Freeman. But folks, when I think about useless in today's political climate, and more so talking about media, let's be honest. When it comes to useless, leading the way is, of course, Uncle Dave. And certainly when we think about lazy people in journalism, yes, folks, we think about Uncle Dave. And we'll sort of discuss his latest take on his show. And it's just kind of interesting to laugh about being concerned about the future of media and where it's headed. Where, folks, let's be honest, the reason a lot of established media has been dying in New Jersey is because of people like David Cruz. It's almost like, oh, the boat's sinking, and here comes the Coast Guard to rescue. And you're like, oh, I don't know why it's sinking. No, you did a lot to sink it. So we'll talk about sort of the blatant hypocrisy by Uncle Dave when it comes to advocating for media and hoping that the state of New Jersey and our tax dollars is going to bail out media. Well, we'll see if they do that during this budget season. But I think it's absolute rich hypocrisy by Uncle Dave to be crying about the need for more media when it's people like Uncle Dave who helped kill it in the first place. More on that during final thoughts. And speaking of useless, let's be honest, folks. Does it come any more useless than useless women than Jay Lassiter? Now, again, a guy who literally does nothing all day, being perhaps one of the worst advocates or surrogates for one of the worst congressional candidates. Now, again, you can say a lot and see a lot and tell a lot about a candidate by the people that support them. And of course, Ana Lilia Mejia running in the 11th congressional district, when you have surrogates like Jay Lassiter, campaigning for you and advocating for you, folks, those are probably people you want nothing to do with. I'll share a little bit about the sort of usual political myopia displayed by little Jay Lassiter later on during final thoughts. And of course, folks, I'll have a special comment. And what do you know? What a surprise. During the month of March, that's right, over 110,000 views. Okay, we were at 109,000 on Saturday. But again, doing some calculations, folks, over 110,000 views for the month of March, all organic, folks, nothing boosted on this show. It's because you trust this brand of fearless independent journalism. You're not trusting other people, but you're trusting me. And I appreciate that. And I'll share my thoughts on that during a special comment later on in the broadcast. Folks, it is election season, and I talk about it all the time, where a lot of establishment journalists aren't talking to candidates all throughout the political spectrum. But guess who is? Fernando Uribe. And I talk to everybody statewide, elected Democrats, elected Republicans, candidates from all walks of life, advocates, surrogates, journalists, you name it, folks. I talk to everybody. It's the reason why this show continues to be successful. And during this election cycle, again, there's always elections in New Jersey, whether in 2024 for president, whether in 2025 for governor, and of course, in 2026, we have a U.S. Senate seat up for grabs. And of course, all 12 congressional districts have elections this year. And we have primaries coming up in June. And one of the more interesting districts to look at is the 3rd congressional district, all the way down in South Jersey. Let's talk to one of the candidates running as a Republican in the 3rd congressional district, folks. He's former U.S. Marine, former retired NYPD officer, and a candidate for the House of Representatives in CD3, folks. He's my good friend, Michael McGuire, joins us live on Real Talk. Michael, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you, Fernando?
Good to talk with you, man. And I appreciate that. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in here, like, comment, and share. It only takes a few seconds to show your support for fearless independent journalism here with Real Talk. So, Michael, welcome aboard here. Appreciate your time. Obviously, it's a busy election season. Primary day is really just almost about less than 2 months away here in New Jersey. Obviously, you've obtained the necessary signatures to be on the ballot. You've been winning some county conventions, even though that there isn't a county line anymore. You know, winning those county conventions, I would argue, are crucial. But before we get to that, obviously, certainly even getting into this race came with some backlash, came with some vitriol, and came with some vilification. I'm going to give you the floor here to sort of address that for you and your candidacy, because early on you were facing some of that and you've won some county conventions, but still some of the chirping persists online. So what do you want to tell our audience tonight about the candidacy of Michael McGuire in the 3rd congressional district?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank you for having me, Fernando. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations on your month of March. I heard the intro with the amount of viewers. So yeah, there was a hit piece put out on me in January, which was clearly rebugged. My ex-wife, clearly stated that the accusation was not true. It was an accusation from over 21 years ago, and unfortunately, my opponents keep recycling it. I believe because they don't really have a message of their own, so their only way to come after me is by regurgitating attack, which is a shame towards my ex-wife, because she was brave enough and strong enough to come out and said it didn't happen, and that a mistake was made over 21 years ago that she made, and she was brave enough to do it, but yet they don't seem to want to believe her on her comment that it didn't happen and that I actually am a wonderful father.
Okay, listen, you aired it. I appreciate that. Not every candidate wants to talk about uncomfortable topics like that, so I applaud you doing so. And again, it's out in the open. And again, I appreciate you shedding some light on it, especially for members of our audience that maybe were not familiar with your candidacy, or B, were, and still have some questions. So I appreciate you taking the time to really outline that here on the show. So let's get into the candidacy. Obviously, the 3rd congressional district at one time some years ago was occupied by the junior United States Senator Andy Kim. It's a district that's gone through some changes, though, Michael, where it used to be kind of a reliably Republican district that has changed a lot, like a lot of districts in New Jersey. It's become purplish to even downright blue now. Maybe not as blue as Windex is up here with me in the 8th congressional district. But what can you tell us about people you've been talking to in CD3 about your candidacy, and what separates you from other Republicans running in the field?
Sure. Well, as you pointed out, it became purple and somewhat blue because the Democrats did exactly what they've been accusing the Republicans of doing in Texas, is that they definitely gerrymandered the district and had it redistricted about 4 years ago in time for Andy Kim's run to take over the spot before he transported it to Herb Conaway Jr. But prior to that, it was a pretty reliable red state until it was taken over. What I've been hearing mostly, though, in District 3, when I started this race, is the biggest issue that has not been addressed in the past 2 years that seat has been held by my opponent, is the affordability issue in New Jersey and the costs is associated to grow a family here, to live here, and to keep, and more importantly, to hope that your children stay here in the future.
Now, we talk, and folks, again, if you just joined us live right now, again, like, comment, and share. It only takes 5 seconds to show your support for fearless independent media here with Real Talk. And my guest tonight is New Jersey 3rd Congressional District candidate, Michael McGuire, here on the show. Folks, drop a comment or a question there in the comment section. It really helps the algorithm here on the program, helps the show grow here on Jersey First TV. Now, Michael, you did mention your potential opponent, should you be successful coming up in the primary in less than 2 months. Listen, I don't like to name drop some people, but Herb Conway has been an awful member of the House of Representatives. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that's just blindly voted along with radical left Democrats in Washington. And, for someone like him and a lot of other, sort of very left-wing radical Democrats in New Jersey or even in Washington, it's interesting when they talk about affordability and somehow, it's the president's fault that New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the country. It's the president's fault that the gas tax went up again this past January. Somehow it's the president's fault that tolls on the Parkway and the Turnpike, as you're driving up and down the 3rd Congressional District to talk to residents, somehow it's the president's fault. Somehow it's Republicans in Washington. Somehow it's Republicans' fault in Trenton. That's not the case, but it's a climate right now where it just seems like being a Republican is kind of difficult. And I'm sure, obviously, you're going to town halls, you're going to street fairs, hopefully, as the weather's getting warmer, food truck festivals, you name it, you're talking to people. What do you want to say to viewers tonight that are maybe on the fence right now about the primary in CD3, but also more about people you're talking to and what kind of Republican you're coming across?
Well, that's very true. I mean, I did have we had wonderful weather on St. Patrick's Day. I was able to make it out to Hamilton and Mercer County, and also the conventions and speaking to everyone else. It's been a great experience. And basically, they asking me, well, politicians keep talking, but what can you actually do about it? And you talk about the gas tax that was raised on January 1st. I mean, people don't realize the gas that we pay, 49 cents of it is a tax that is going to New Jersey. Another 18 cents is going to the federal government. And nobody's talking about, they're just blaming each other on what they can do about it. How about this? You're worried about gas taxes going up. I don't know why my opponent hasn't introduced legislation down in Washington of a gas tax holiday right now to relieve the gas tax for everyone. How about next time he votes for the big beautiful bill to increase to reduce and increase the salt tax also? And he also talks about affordability, and you talk about going along partisan lines. I would think my opponent, I don't know how he looks at a waiter or a waitress or a service member when he goes out to dinner and said, you know what, if it was up to me, I'd tax you on those tips. I don't know how he looks at older people in the community and says, I want to tax you on your Social Security, or all the hardworking members in my community, I want to tax you on your overtime. He had an opportunity to cross, party lines there and say, you know what, I stand up for my residents in CD3, and I understand, let them keep home more of their paycheck if you want to talk about affordability. But he says, you know what, no, I'm not going to go like that just because the other side introduced the bill. So he hasn't voted on one side that's best for CD3 constituents. He has voted on what his party said to do. I wonder sometimes if he understands what's in the bill. I wonder if he even actually understands what district he's in, because I found a funny news article last week that, on part of the District 4 in Chris Smith's district, Congressman Smith's district, and during a ballot, during a challenge to a petition, Herb Conway Jr.'s signature was actually thrown off for signing CD4's, petition, not even understanding what district he lives in. So it makes me wonder if he really understands the legislation that's going forth and what's best for his actual district.
And just to sort of pile on with that, I mean, it's interesting. It's tax season, and you would hope that for hardworking Americans that work, for example, in the service industry, and I know that pain. I worked it during grad school. I understand it. I get it. Why New Jersey doesn't participate, again, when it comes to that, when it comes to no tax on tips and overtime and helping seniors. And more so, it seems like Herb Conway is very happy to vote along with very progressive members of his caucus when it comes to coddling illegals. And as we all know here in New Jersey, unfortunately, it was codified into sanctuary statehood with the election of a new governor. And we're seeing that New Jersey, and again, folks, if you missed last week's episode with State Assemblyman Paul Kinitra, he was the author of that report when it comes to how much New Jersey spends every year thus far on paying for illegals, essentially coddling illegals. And it was somewhere in the neighborhood, Michael, of like $7 billion. And it's crazy. And And just to give our audience a little bit of an education on this, because when we talk about Medicaid, obviously it's coming from the federal government, and we see how Medicaid dollars are appropriated by state. And here's the truth. This is not me bullshitting people. This is, folks, there's something called Google. You can easily look this up yourself if you don't believe me. But the way that Medicaid dollars are appropriated, Michael, here in New Jersey, and you can educate me and tell me if I'm wrong, but the fact is that, yes, illegals do not directly receive Medicaid. That's correct. But what New Jersey does, like other blue states do, is what they do is they take Medicaid dollars that they're getting from Washington and they appropriate into what's called, in this state, for example, NJ Family Care. Now that fund allows New Jersey residents, both citizens and illegals, if you do not have access to health care, you can apply for health insurance for you and your children. And in many cases, Michael, obviously, whether it's illegals, and in some cases, they're anchor babies that are born here, they have access to that fund. So if they apply, they will have access to health care. Now, they're not receiving Medicaid directly, but Medicaid dollars go into NJ Family Care. Vis-a-vis, we're subsidizing illegals in New Jersey with our tax dollars. And people like Herb Conway are more than happy to see our Medicaid dollars go to that. What do you want to say to people like Herb Conway and others in Congress that just somehow overlook this?
I don't think they're overlooking it. I think they know it very well, and that's their plan to keep feeding into this system, because it's part of a bigger picture here of what's going on in New Jersey. The reason that they advocate and want illegals in here is very clear, and this is what actually the president is trying to fight about, the census of counting undocumented and illegal immigrants in the census, is because what happens on the census, that you put all the illegals in these areas in New Jersey, and now they're counted in the census, and that equals more representation in the Democratic areas. Okay, so I don't think it's an accident. I don't think they're overlooking it. I think they're literally using our taxpayer funds that are going towards this, and they're subsidizing their medical, and they're welcoming the illegals here in order to increase their power in the House of Representatives. That's what I think the really underlying effect and the strategy is here, because they're counted in the census. It increases their electoral numbers by the representation that they have here, and they're trying to increase their power. They're not looking out for CD3, New Jersey, or Americans by doing that. They're just trying to hold on to their power. And they're also subsidizing in other ways. Even if the illegal immigration doesn't get those subsidies, they wind up going to the hospitals. The hospitals pass them on as charity cases because they have to treat them, they have to take care of them. And then what happens to the money? Like anything else, it gets dissipated to the law-abiding citizens that are doing the right thing, and they wind up paying extra for their care anyway. It's a revolving circle that goes around. It increases the infrastructure issues in our community. It increases it has a problem with supply and demand with housing. It has a problem with supply and demand on every little issue that does the exact opposite of what they say they're trying to fight, is the cost of living here. Because we don't have an inflation problem here. As much as they're trying to say that we have an inflation problem, inflation was over 9% under President Biden. Right now, it's 2-point-something% change under President Trump. There is no inflation problem. The problem is that the cost of living is high because of all the other effects that are taking place on there.
Absolutely. Well said there. Folks, if you're just joining us live right now, it's 6:18 here on the East Coast. My guest tonight is Michael McGuire, running in the 3rd Congressional District, coming up in the June primary. Here are our guests tonight. Folks, like, comment, and share. It takes 5 seconds to show your support for fearless, independent journalism here with Real Talk. Now, folks, for everyone at home, just a little bit of education here. If you're not familiar with the 3rd Congressional District, you better buckle up here. It's a lot of towns here. So I'm going to list every town here in the 3rd Congressional District. It consists of municipalities in Burlington County, Mercer, and Monmouth County. Let's start with Monmouth County, folks. If you're not familiar, it includes Allentown, Englishtown, Freehold Borough, Freehold Township, which is also part of the 4th, East Freehold, and West Freehold, Homedale Township, Manalapan Township, Marlborough Township, Millstone Township, Roosevelt, Upper Freehold Township. Now, as we move a little bit north into, west into Mercer County, we have East Windsor, Hamilton Township, Heightstown, Lawrence Township, and Robbinsville Township. And of course, we go a little bit southwest. This is the big one, folks. 38 municipalities in Burlington County, which include Bass River Township, Beverly, Bordentown, Bordentown Township, Burlington, Burlington Township, Chesterfield Township, Cinnamon Township, Delanco Township, Delround Township, East Hampton Township, my goodness, Edgewater Park, Evesham Township, Fieldsboro, Florence Township, Hainesport Township, Lumberton, Mansfield Township, Medford Lakes, Medford, Morristown, Mount Holly, Mount Laurel, New Hanover Township, North Hanover Township, Pemberton Borough, Pemberton Township, Riverside Township, Riverton, Shamong Township, Southampton Township, Springfield Township, Tabernacle Township, West Hampton, Willenboro Township, Woodland Township, and Wrightstown. Oh, all right. Wow. That's a big congressional district. Michael, how's it going as you're traveling throughout the district? A lot of towns I just named. My goodness. I know you were involved in some recent county conventions, and with the abolition of the county line, I think now more than ever, you're looking at county conventions as hopefully the most democratic way to select candidates and who county committee people are looking to back during a primary race. Now, you did mention, I think early on, you were able to win, I think, Monmouth, and I think you mentioned Mercer County.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so take us, and for our audience, maybe it's not involved or familiar with the process, what does that entail? You're going to that county convention. Obviously, all county committee people are seated. You're talking to them. What was some of the feedback that you got from the county committee people that were sitting there in CD3, in those counties specifically, and were hearing your message, hearing your platform, and what was the feedback during those conventions?
Sure. So, every county has their different process, and I respect each one of their processes. But the committee members all have the same theme. They're sick of, giving up this CD3 spot to somebody that's not truly representing them or anyone else in the district. So they want to know who is a true Republican, who can win this seat, and who's going to be our best representative going forward in November. And at that point, each convention has a process on how you get to speak, on how you get nominated, and then the vote. So we did overwhelmingly very well in Mercer County with 78% of the vote. Monmouth County, we had the unanimous endorsement of Monmouth County. And then we did very well in Burlington County against the recommendation of the committee of pulling 35% of the vote. So we've had a very successful, very good endorsements. And the biggest thing is who can beat Herb Conaway at the end of the day in November. And I am the best well-rounded candidate out of my fellow primary contenders. I won't call them opponents because they are fellow Republicans like I am. So to me, they're not an opponent. At the end of the day, our hope is that we win in November. That's the goal on November 3rd, is that at the end of the day, a Republican is the winner in CD3, because that's what's going to be best for everybody in the district, regardless whether they're Republican, Democrat, or independent, which actually in CD3, there are more independents than there are Democrats.
And that's the goal, right? To win them over, like in any district where independents arguably are the biggest demographic there. Let's get back to what kind of Republican is running during this election cycle. I'm not sure if you had a chance to catch my episodes this year, Michael, but I've been talking to congressional candidates in CD11, obviously Joe Hathaway, mayor of Randolph, I hope he can win coming up on the 16th, because the last thing we need is a socialist being elected to the House. We have enough socialists already in Washington. We don't need another one. But we have some interesting races in CD6, which is nearby, with Hillary Hersig, great candidate I talked to earlier this year, as well as Greg Neely, who is running in the 12th congressional district. So very, very sort of spread out districts, just like CD3 is. But it's a tough climate to be a Republican these days, apparently. And I talked to David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe, shortly after Election Day last November. I talked to other journalists, such as Brent Johnson from NJ Advanced Media and others. And, again, I don't want to sound apocalyptic here, because I'm as true a conservative as there is. I vote Republican for as long as I can remember. But it's a tough time to be a Republican in New Jersey, or even nationally, Michael. And especially in a state like New Jersey, where we got our clocks cleaned thoroughly. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, if Cheryl was going to win, it could be a close race, 2 to 3 points, like I anticipated, just like I thought maybe Cheryl really would win by 2 or 3 points. That wasn't the case. It was a solid, decisive victory by Cheryl by more than 12 points. We saw in New Jersey legislatively, we saw Democrats flip 8 assembly seats, even solidify their majorities even more. And then came the autopsy in the weeks and months after that, about what kind of Republican can win in New Jersey. And we've had every Republican under the sun opine, whether it's State Senator John Bramnick, whether it's radio personality and former gubernatorial candidate Bill Spadea, whether it's other Republicans, whether it's the new chair of the New Jersey Republican Party, Christine Hanlon, who coincidentally was on this show a few weeks ago. It seems like every Republican has an opinion about what kind of Republican can win in New Jersey. But what are the facts about what kind of Republican can win in this election cycle, Michael, and more so in CD3?
Well, I believe, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, pure definition of insanity as we understand that, and that's what we need to do this election cycle, is make sure that we don't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. That's the one thing about the current governor's campaign. They messaged, they reached out voters better than we did. Nothing against Jack's campaign, but that was it. That was in the audit. That was in a moratorium after the election on what happened. She sent out those text messages that morning. She reached out to the voters. They sent out a message directly to the voters. We need to make sure that we hear each voter. We need to make sure we understand their concerns, and we need to make sure we deliver the message to them, because at the end of the day, we have a better message. We have a better platform. We are better for affordability. The question is, how do we reach those voters to let them understand that? How do we reach the voter to let them understand that we are the ones that are going to have the best path forward for them to live here and to have a better life with their children and their grandchildren, be able to afford to stay here? Because it's wonderful. I'm a grandfather. I have a 2-year-old, and I don't want my son and my grandson to have to leave the state, because they can't afford to live here. And what am I going to do as a grandparent then at that point? I want to see him grow up and live into this district. So the question is, how do we get those messages out there? Well, we use technology. We don't go by the same playbook that we go out all the time. We understand, we make sure they understand why that the cost of living is so high, how we can fix it. The cost of living here, you talked about the gas tax earlier. Part of the cost of living has to do with transporting goods. I mean, I talked about the 49-cent gas tax that we pay. Most people don't realize that on top of that, diesel is a 58-cent gas tax. Okay. And where does that money go? It gets sent down to the consumer. It gets poured down in the cost of goods here. If you reduce that gas tax, or if you reduce the property tax, which is, I had another increase on my property tax this year. It's been outrageous since I moved here, the increase of property taxes. And yet on top of that, they're talking about shutting down schools. They're consolidating schools on top of increasing property tax. It's not even like that you pay all this money and the schools are lined in gold or anything like that. It's not getting used effectively. They're spending other people's money with any way they want to spend it. And it's not being used effectively. It's one thing if you're paying high property taxes and you're at a situation where it's second to none, the absolute best. We're not getting what we pay for here. That is one of the biggest issues. Okay. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, if a politician tells you they're going to be able to lower taxes, they're not going to be able to lower taxes. They're never going to, put the toothpaste back in the tube, as they say.
Correct. Yeah.
But we need to stop. We need to stop the insanity in the sense of what we really need to do is that we need wage growth to go up and keep the cost of living at the same, the inflation rate. That's how we're going to combat the cost of living here in New Jersey, is by increasing wages. And there's absolutely no reason not to increase wages if I was talking about the trickle-down effect of the illegal immigration at this point. We're competing against other people for jobs. So as when I used to own my own business, when I had my own law practice before I started working for somebody, if I had 10 people out there for an interview, I can basically offer, what I want for salary, and there, I have my choices. If we only have 1 or 2 people out there for an interview at that point, I need to hire somebody. I'm going to have to increase the wage and be a lot more competitive. It's simple supply and demand. And here we don't have it, and you talk about the workers that with the minimum wage, and they want to increase minimum wage. And what did that do? Look how much people are paying for their hamburger when they go to McDonald's now. I remember I used to be able to go to a diner and get a hamburger and French fries for $5. You can't even you can't get anything for that cost anymore. You can't go. I have 3 boys, that live at home with me and my wife. You can't go out to fast food. It costs you $75 to go out for a fast food dinner. It's absolutely absurd. And then you talk about my opponent that's been in Trenton since 1997. He's not the solution. He's been the problem with the cost that's been going on.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been a career politician. He talks about, I'm going to fix something. Well, why haven't you done it yet? You haven't fixed anything. In fact, you've made it worse. The state, it used to be called the Garden State here, for a reason. We used to, have farming that was more prevalent here. I mean, Burlington County still, that's why it's one of my favorite rides going through Burlington County. You still see the farmland there. We need to do better. We need to make sure we promote local businesses here. We need to make sure that things are taken care of. Mercer County, they're dealing with Trenton Waterworks. That's been complete and utter disaster that Herb Conaway hasn't advocated for. I haven't seen him one time on the House floor saying, or putting pressure on Trenton, fix that. The only thing that he's putting pressure on is no choice for parents. He's putting pressure on getting your kids immunizations against your religious exemption. He's putting pressure on your kids for getting a COVID jab and keeping them out of school. He's doing the opposite, what's good for CD3. And we have to put that message out there. Unfortunately, I don't think that message was put out 2 years ago. One of my biggest issues is parental rights, too. And that message wasn't going out there. He says, you know what, you may be religious, you may have an exception, but I still want to jab your kid. He's taking money from Big Pharma. He's supposed to be a doctor, and he's not talking about a healthy living. It's all about what kind of medication can we stick in you? What can I sell? What can I sell my services for on Congress here? It's not what's best for the individual here, and that's exactly, that was the first thing that the tipping point. The straw that broke the camel's back is what made me run. I don't know if you're aware, I'm also in the Navy Reserves right now. Okay. So when I first started to run was because Herb Conaway decided to shut down the government over healthcare for illegal immigration back in October and November. Shut down for a couple of months. You mentioned that before with the election, the governor's election. Okay. And then somehow they messaged it that it was the Republicans' fault that the government was shut down. No, we voted to fund the government, but they wanted to withhold and hold people hostage. And who did they hold hostage? They held hostage my fellow service members. They kicked people off McGuire Dix Air Force Base, Herb Conaway Jr., by shutting down the government that were considered non-essential workers. They put reservists out of work. I'm fortunate enough that I have a full-time job and I'm done with school, but yet these reservists, they count on this pay when they go once a month. They signed a contract to put their life on the line for our country, and he couldn't even defend them. He put them out of work. They count on that $400 or $500 a month in drill pay that they get to pay for their school tuition or pay for their gas or anything like that. And he put them out of work for 2 months. We were very fortunate. The active duty was very fortunate under leadership of President Trump securing funding, just like we're dealing with it again. We're in an armed conflict right now, and they're playing games with our security at the airport. They're playing games with our national security on homeland. Our homeland security. The Coast Guard is going without pay right now. And why? Because they want to defund ICE. Newsflash, ICE is funded until 2029. So what are you accomplishing? And they know that.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is, Herb Conaway and fellow congressional Democrats will be the first ones. And I talked about this last week when I covered the No Kings nonsense, the third round of it with all these ridiculous rallies where, this is a guy that during the Biden administration would be more than happy to see servicemen and women lose their jobs for not being vaccinated, was more than happy to see businesses shut down in New Jersey, was more than happy to see people, having to stay in their homes, or people, snitching to hotlines, right, about residents having more gatherings of more than 5 or 6 people. So it's people like Herb Conaway that, are crying about tyranny and the erosion of democracy. Not a problem during the Joe Biden years when Joe Biden was barely awake. But hey, guess what? And to someone like you, a service member, I think this resonates more for me. And what really bothered me was, like, I know servicemen and women who lost their jobs, who were, again, shipped home because they weren't vaccinated. Same thing with police officers. Same thing with EMT and firefighters. If you weren't vaccinated, I'm not vaccinated. But guess what? You know what? I could be canceled, or I stood the possibility of losing my job, and not a peep from people like Herb Conway and others that were all about, tyranny and again, we're living in a dictatorship and we're living under a king. Like Herb Conway feeds into that bullshit like a lot of other members in the House that he's so, is arms, locks arms and arms with. So it's disappointing though, Michael, when I see people like that who, again, to your point about he's been entrenched in New Jersey forever. Okay. Like Bill Clinton was finishing his second term when this guy was in Trenton. And the reason the New Jersey has become such a shithole is because of people like Herb Conway, who won't debate, who don't like social media dissent, and somehow thinks he's doing a good job in Washington, and he's not. So, I'm glad to see people like you running to highlight these things.
I'm sure, like you just said, he won't debate. I'm hoping, I'm optimistically cautiously optimistic that we are going to prevail in the primary. And if I do, I'm hoping that he does debate us, because I know I'm going to win on the issues. I know that he cannot win on his record. And like you stated, you talked about the No Kings rally. He was directly involved in Trenton during COVID that shut everything down and gave no choice to people. He does not want to give you a choice. He wants to dictate. He wants to do what he wants to do, and that's it. And it's not even what he wants to do. If Jeffrey says something up in the House, he's just going to repeat it. He's going to say whatever he's told to say and march in line to do what he's supposed to do to stay in power and fundraise money. And that's the end of and that's exactly what he plans on doing. He's going, I think, hopefully he takes this race lightly, which I'm sure he will, because he's the incumbent and thinks that this is a strong Democratic district. Hopefully he does, because I don't think he understands the people in this district. He put McGuire Dix Air Force Base is the largest employer in the state of New Jersey, and he voted not to fund them and put them out of work. And that's his district on top of that, which is completely mind-blowing to me. There was people in his district, and this is right before the holidays. How can you look at people in your district and say right before the holidays, you know what? I am going to take an illegal immigrant's healthcare position over yours. And what happened at the end of the day? Did they get their healthcare for illegal immigrants? Nothing transpired out of it at the end of the day. How about this? You're a legislator, Mr. Conaway. Legislate. If you want to do something and you want to change reform to immigration, customs, and enforcement, introduce legislation to do that. Don't hold other programs hostage. Don't hold New Jersey and safety and American citizens hostage. Do we not remember 9/11 that long ago? I remember it because I was down at Ground Zero as an NYPD police officer, and we said we were never going to forget. But it seems when we hold TSA and other people hostage for other things, funding, stuff that was already pre-approved, earmarked and ready to go, and now we just need to pass the funding for the budget, you're holding it hostage. If you want people from ICE not to wear masks, introduce legislation in Congress to do that. Don't hold somebody's job hostage and try to put pressure and make the Republicans look bad.
And and I'm glad you mentioned ICE. Obviously, since it is an agency under the Department of Homeland Security, and subsequently, shortly after the terrorist attacks by Islamic extremists in 2001, Michael, subsequently the creation of the Department of Homeland Security came into fruition in 2003. And obviously we saw many federal agencies sort of consolidated, reassigned within that new department. And, for years, right, for decades, we would look at immigration as, again, immigration, naturalization, INS, that changed after the creation of DHS into what we now know as ICE. So whether it's, candidates running in CD11, Democratic Socialists, basically, or other Democrats running in New Jersey, there seems to be this, and you're an attorney. So again, I took con law in grad school, at Rutgers, Newark, and I got an A in it, but you're the attorney, so you can educate me on this. It just seems like Democrats like Herb Conway are trying to, I would say, acquiesce to the low information voter when it comes to how to view ICE. And listen, I'm intellectually honest on this program, Michael. Should ICE officers receive more than 47 days of training? Certainly. I used to work in criminal justice. I don't disagree for a minute. Should ICE officers have body cams like other law enforcement do? Certainly. You won't hear an objection out of me. Can we reform some practices and tactics of ICE? Certainly. But the idea that somehow people like Herb Conway and his colleagues are just screaming to the heavens, abolish ICE, that's not realistic. B, that would require having to rework the entire charter of the Department of Homeland Security. And for example, just last week, there was a candidate running for a House seat in CD 11, a Democrat, when asked, well, if you want to abolish ICE, then what do you put in its place? What do you do to oversee federal immigration enforcement? And she just danced around it. It was like watching Kamala Harris with a bullshit word salad rant. And she couldn't answer the question. And I would just say, hey, you can't just abolish an agency. You'd have to either reorganize it. If you want to modify tactics, modify training, I'm all for that. However, abolishing this agency seems to be like, oh, the common little clickbait term that Democrats like Herb Conway want to use, but it's not realistic, Michael. Is any of what I just outlined, what's true and what's not true?
It's 100% true what you're saying. Just like they ran years ago on defund the police. And how did that work out for us?
Terrible.
Crime skyrocketed. It was an absolute disaster. Cities were burning. Okay. And the same thing when people say, let's get rid of the IRS. You're not getting rid of agencies without replacing and just calling it something else. Okay. So if you want to study ICE and their operations, that's one thing. Okay, then you have hearings on it and you come up with an idea of saying, hey, what law enforcement agency works best? How do we come up with an agency that enforces law the best? Well, number one, maybe Mickey Sherrill, our current governor, should not be setting sanctuary states up and making it more dangerous for immigration custom enforcement that need to execute these high task warrants. These are coming from people that's never executed a warrant and being in a dangerous situation that don't understand that. Do ICE officers make mistakes? Of course they make mistakes. They're human beings just like anybody else, okay? But I'll put their record up any day of the week over any of these Democratic politicians. You know, I'm sure they're effective. They're a lot more effective than our politicians, okay? And if Herb Conway wants them to change, put legislation and put reform in there on how they can change and come up with an idea rather than just saying get rid of them and call them. I mean, I remember I looked at a post of his in the beginning of January calling them murderers. I mean, that's absolutely disgusting. These are law enforcement people that put their life on the line to protect us and to protect my family every single day. However, you know, we're calling them murderers and traitors and stuff like that. Their pay is minimal, okay? They compared to what a politician's making.
Yeah.
You know, the members of Congress, I believe they're making $175,000 a year or whatever it may be. And you got these ICE officers that are putting their life on the line and getting stuck in this political limbo here for their small starting salary. You got to wear a bulletproof vest to work here, you know, and go after these high dangerous criminals that are wanted for rape, murder, and all other types of things, and they don't want to be caught. And the problem is we have these sanctuary cities like you have in Minnesota and you have here now in New Jersey that won't cooperate with law enforcement. How about this? How about you allow Immigration's Customs Enforcement to go up to the prisons and go pick them up and not have to go knock down doors and not have to go into the community to go pick them up? They're not exactly.
Yeah, listen, exactly. This doesn't happen in red states because they're cooperating with federal law enforcement to go to these county jails, to go to these state prisons and get rid of these dangerous illegals. Only in New Jersey is it asked backwards. We're like, well, you know, we have to protect our residents. Isn't it interesting, though? And folks, again, if you just joined us live at 640 here on the East Coast, my guest tonight is Michael McGuire, running in the 3rd Congressional District, coming up in the Republican primary in June. And isn't it interesting, though, Michael, that people like Herb Conway and other Democrats will talk about and mention, well, all I care about is making New Jersey safe for residents. No, you want to make it safe for illegals. Like, just come out and stop bullshitting and say what you mean. Like, don't just say, well, you know, sanctuary statehood is necessary because we need to protect all communities. No, you're looking to protect your voter base, again, because without illegals counted in the census. And it boggles my mind, too, why this hasn't been fought in the courts more fervently. You know, people like Conway it boggles my mind where he's more concerned about the rights and the quality of life for illegals when it's New Jersey residents, like citizens, who are struggling to, pay rents or property taxes in a state like New Jersey. Listen, Michael, where I live up here in Hudson County, I get it. I walk 2 blocks, I look at Manhattan. I walk a block, I have a light rail. I get it. I live in the most densely populated county in the country. Never mind the state, in the country. I get it. I'm paying for my view. I'm paying for where I live. I get all that stuff. But down in CD3, what is it? It is as spacious as open air. Okay, we're talking about farmland. We're talking about rural areas, suburban areas. I mean, the idea that residents in that district have to be struggling the way they are. Again, Conway had a big part to do with that, being in Trenton for so many years, and then sort of moving up into a House seat. It's mind-boggling where I get it. The vote blue no matter who crowd. Again, we're not talking about a high political IQ to begin with, but they're happy to just keep voting people into office that are cutting their legs out from under them.
Yeah, well, we got to take responsibility as Republicans too, because we're not delivering the message enough, and we're not getting them registered as Republicans, and we're not delivering a message where they want to go into that voting booth enthusiastically and pull that lever for red that day. So that's what my campaign is focusing on. My campaign is focusing on reaching every registered voter and non-registered voter to get them registered. Number 2, and we're going to reach every single registered voter out there. I don't care if they're a Democrat, Independent, or Republican. They're going to hear what my plan is and why we can get affordability. I have an extensive background. I have the background that checks every single box on relatability to each person in the district, because as a police officer, I was in one of the largest unions in New York City. So I understand what it's like to be a union person, okay? I'm also currently in the military reserves. I was also an active duty military person. So I understand the struggles of the people that live on McGuire Dix Air Force Base, okay? And then I also, believe it or not, before I became an attorney, I have an MBA, and then I did accounting work. So I understand taxes, and I understand how they work, and I understand the reality of it. Okay, and I understand the trickle-down economics of people that don't think that stuff doesn't go downhill. It directly goes downhill. We keep having higher regulations. We keep having increase in taxes. We have increase of gas. We have increase of tolls. Where do those businesses, where do those trucks pass that buck on to? It just came out the other day. Cruise ships are increasing the price and having a gas surcharge. Why? Because gas is going up. Okay, but why is gas going up? Why can't Herb Conaway, if I was him, the first thing I would do is sit on the legislative floor tomorrow and say, hey, I want a holiday on the gas tax. Then I'm going to call the governor of Trenton, up in Trenton, and I'm going to call the governor and all the other people that I've been in office with since 1997. I say, hey, here's a good idea. Why don't we put some legislation together to give a gas tax holiday during this crisis? We could relieve the people's wallets right now. We can put a gas tax holiday. We've done it with sales tax holidays, and we've done all other types of holidays on taxes. We can alleviate 49 cents a gallon directly right from New Jersey on the gas tax holiday. And I don't know why no one's producing that. I don't know why Herb Conaway is not on the House floor saying, let's get rid of this 18 cents a gallon federal tax too at the same time. There's ways that we can do things. And there's ways that the amount of waste that goes on in government and the amount of money that is spent since I've really started digging my nose into things. And what does it come down to? It comes down to one simple equation. I looked at the FEC reports. If you look at the top donors, okay, 8 out of the 10 top donors are going to all Democrat candidates. And where are they coming from? They're coming from these special interest groups. Okay, they're not coming from the middle-class workers that they pretend to protect. And who's number 3 on that list? I believe it's our own Senator Cory Booker. Okay, he's got $25 million in cash in the bank. $25 million cash in the bank to run a Senate election this year. I don't believe it's for the Senate election this year. I think he's already skipping past the Senate election. He's got hopes in 2028. And I hope whoever wins the nominee.
I mean, let's be honest about Spartacus. I think he has about as much chance as becoming president as the New York Mets winning a World Series. Again, no offense to Met fans out there, but we just got to call it is. And what you mentioned before about Conway, again, Michael, I'm with you on that, but that will require way too much critical thinking for our representative in the House in CD3 to engage in. That's way too much critical thinking, for sure. Let me ask you this. Should you be successful coming up in June in the primary and hopefully defeating Herb Conway in November, and you take office in January of 2027, what do you want to tackle that perhaps isn't talked about enough? And some things that come to mind for me, and I want to pick your brain on it. Is it infrastructure? Is it constituent services? What do you, obviously you talked about affordability and other things as well, but what do you want to tackle should you be able to take office in January of 2027 in Washington?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is, I see a lot of times Herc Conaway all of a sudden is now promoting these town halls. Okay. I'm not going to be doing a town hall where questions are pre-selected. I'm going to have office hours. I'm going to make this a pledge right now to every voter in CD3 is I'm going to have office hours every 2 weeks. And I'm going to rotate that through each district, each municipality, each town. I'm going to also rotate the dates. One day I'll have it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even a Sunday for people that can't get there the other days. And I'm going to switch the times around. Okay. And I'm not going to make my office, I'm not going to have appointments. It's going to be first come, first serve. And I'm not going to leave my office until I hear every single voter on what they need from me and their constituents. Okay? It's not going to be office hours. It's not going to be pre-planned fluff questions. It's going to be one-on-one actual interaction with your congressman. I want to know what your issues are, because sometimes you're talking about a district that goes across 3 counties. There's no possible way that a representative is going to know exactly every little issue that's going on in every section in the county. I'm going to want to know how I can help. And if it's a statewide issue, because sometimes a lot of the majority is statewide issues, it's going to be, okay, let me see what I can do here. I'm going to make a phone call up to assemblyman. I'm going to make a phone call here. I'm going to put pressure on here to make sure that we resolve this issue. And if it's federal issue, I'm going to see what I can do and make sure that I can maybe pass legislation or push legislation forward. And the other thing is, one of the first things I'm going to work on that I'm going to try to do, I signed within the first day of my candidacy, is that I signed a pledge for term limits. I'm going to put myself out of work. Okay, because this is not supposed to be a job. It's supposed to be service to the country. It's supposed to be service to the constituents in our district. It's not meant to be a lifetime job. It's not meant to be going from being in office since 1997 or Nancy Pelosi being a career politician. It's meant to be a service to the country. Okay, and there's absolutely no reason that there should be lifetime politicians. And as somebody that has an MBA in accounting, the math just doesn't math for me when you make $175,000 a year as a congressional person, and somehow you're worth multi millions of dollars after a few years in office. There needs to be investigations done into these people on how they got their expansive wealth after just a few years in office. I think it's absolutely absurd that people are getting enriched on the backs of our tax-paying dollars while we're sitting here struggling to pay our bills every day. I know what it's like to have to go shopping and feed my 3 boys every single day. I'm very fortunate. I was able to take my military career. I went right out of high school into the military. I had a GI Bill, which was pre-9/11 GI Bill. I have substantial student loan debt. I have bills like everybody else here. I know what it's like to struggle. Yes, people may think, oh, I'm an attorney, I have a lot of money. I do not. I'm struggling just like anyone else in here. I'm very fortunate with the occupation I have. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But I worked hard for it. I put myself through the military, and I started going to school when I was 27 years old. I ate ramen noodle soup for weeks on end because I know.
God, I remember those days. Oh my goodness. I remember those days. Yes.
Yeah. And I was a single father. I raised my oldest son from the time that he was 4 years old until I met my wonderful, beautiful wife now when he was 25 years old. Now he's 25 years old, but I met my wife when he was 14 years old. So I raised my son for over 10 years as a single parent. So I went to school full time and also worked full time. So I understand the struggles of what people are going through. And I think that's the biggest thing, that our elected officials are out of touch. I think Herc Conaway is completely out of touch with the voter here in this district. And I think that's exactly what we need in here, that somebody that understands the struggles. And for me to be reminded every 2 weeks when I meet with every constituent, I don't care if I leave my office at 4 o'clock in the morning, I will be there until the last person needs to be seen that night. And I will do it every 2 weeks, and I will flip it around, whether it's on a weekend, whether it's during the week. That is my commitment, because I'm a Marine, and I'm telling you, I've spent plenty of days and nights without sleep, and I have no problem with that. And I believe in service to this country, and I believe this, at my age, this is where I can do it now. I can't exactly be running around and jumping out of planes anymore at 48 years old, so this is the way that I'm going to give back now to my community that's given me so much, because I've had that opportunity to live the American dream, where I, had no college education at 25 years old, but going through the military and being able to having the ability to take out student loans that I will repay back. I took them out. I'm responsible for them. I signed the papers. They will be repaid. Okay. We need to start taking responsibility for ourselves. We need to be able to start realizing the American dream is not guaranteed, but it's there, and the ability for it to be there and to aid people on to do it. And I feel, and that's exactly what I think the Democrats are doing to try to win votes. They're trying to give away things for free because they want things to be given for nothing. And it sounds pretty good, right? If someone says, hey, your student loans are gone, I'll be like, oh my God, I want to vote for that guy. I was almost convinced with the amount of my student loans are.
Again, it's sort of like fishing. It's how they hook you. Like a lot of people like Herb Conway and others, it's like they can try to reel you in with the catchphrases, abolish ICE, free this, free that. Folks, there's nothing free. It's taxpayer funded. So when we talk about, free, again, I'm someone, Michael, who not just as a journalist, I'm also an academic. I'm a policy nerd. So do I understand the importance of, re-examining healthcare? Sure. Do I want a healthier population? Of course. That means more people are working. People can spend more time with their families. There's no downside to a healthier population. Does it, when people talk, progressives or people like Herb Conway talk about, free universal daycare. That's great. You want to help parents, sure, but it's paid somehow. And it's money doesn't grow on trees, despite what, again, someone like Herb Conway, who clearly failed biology since he subscribes to a lot of identity politics nonsense, failed at economics. But these are the type of far left Democrats in Washington that are doing us a disservice, and more so here in New Jersey. So without a doubt, obviously, I think you really nailed that. Folks, it's 6:54 here on the East Coast. We're about to wrap up shortly with Michael McGuire running in the 3rd Congressional District here in New Jersey coming up in June during the Republican primary. We're about to wrap up here shortly with him. Michael, any URLs, social media links, anything you want to share with our audience tonight about getting involved with your campaign and how to reach you online?
Sure, absolutely. So our website is Michael McGuire for Congress.com. Okay, it's FOR, it's not the number 4, so it's Michael McGuire for Congress.com. Also, you can email me directly at michaelmcguireforcongress@gmail.com. We actually we're launching an event for primary night, which is we just secured the comedian Joe DeVito is going to be joining us on primary night at Leonardo's in Mercer County. It's going to be a $100 ticket, but you're going to get food, alcohol included, and a comedy show that night. And we're going to watch the results come in, and we're going to prepare our campaign for November 3rd election at that point. We're going to get ready to move forward. We have Instagram and X account as well. And the website has all the social media links. We could obviously, it's bad to say, but it's the reality of the race. In order to beat Herb Conway out there and get our message across, we need to fundraise money. And we've been doing a wonderful job on that thus far. And obviously I can use everyone's support to get this message across. And I would appreciate anyone visiting the website. And also I'm very interactive on Facebook. You send me a question, I'm going to answer that question. You're going to have a policy debate on me, I'll definitely respond to you. We've been getting our message out there, and I believe that we are the best candidate to beat Herb Conway Jr. in November. I believe we'll get the message out there. And I really can't emphasize it enough, whether it's me or one of my other opponents, we must win this election in November. Because what they're going to do in November is, if we lose this election and we lose the House, it's just going to be another 2 years of impeaching Donald Trump. That's all they're going to do. They're not, and then they're going to fundraise on the same exact issues the Democrats in 2 years from now, and saying that we need to win the presidency because nothing happened in the last 2 years while we were trying to impeach the president. That is their game plan 101. Impeach, hate, and obstruct. And there will be absolutely nothing accomplished besides the American people standing there at the end of the day with no results.
No, listen, all fair points there. Folks, again, it's 7 o'clock here on the East Coast. We're about to wrap up here with NJCD3 candidate Michael McGuire here in the state of New Jersey, coming up on primary day in June. Obviously, our guest here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. Michael, I'd like to do, as I close out the episode, is I like to do a quick lightning round, a little word association with the candidate. We've gotten to know Michael McGuire, the candidate, Michael McGuire, the police officer, Michael McGuire, the Marine. But let's just talk to Michael McGuire, the guy, the regular Jersey guy. Quick lightning round, and here we go. Favorite MLB team?
You mentioned him before. I'm a New York Mets fan, born in the
Okay.
'80s. And, you know, I was born actually in the late '70s. So let's go Mets.
Okay. Favorite Met all time?
Favorite Met all the time has to be Mike Piazza. Seeing him hit the home run ball after 9/11.
That against the Braves. I mean, that was an emotional home run. I remember that in late September 2001. That was really, really emotional. Nice call there. Favorite NFL team?
Favorite NFL team is the New York Giants.
Okay. Favorite Giant?
Favorite Giant of all time has to be, it's got to be Eli Manning. The guy showed up to work every single Sunday. He was durable. He brought us 2 championships. He sent Brady packing home twice.
Well, listen, interesting. I'm a big Cowboy fan. As obviously, if you look at my social medias, tough time to be a Cowboy fan. It's 30 years and counting since the championship, but it could be worse, right? On the flip side, I'm a big Yankee fan. I'm as down on the Yankees as anybody. I don't like our manager. I don't like our general manager. 17 years of futility. By the looks of it, I'll probably be waiting for another World Series as well. It is March Madness. Obviously, tonight is the national championship for men's college basketball. Any favorite NCAA team that you follow? Or again, I'm not sure who you're an alumni of, but who do you follow?
I usually don't follow college basketball, to be honest with you. You know, I'll watch a little bit of the March Madness, but you know, my focus has been on the campaign trail. I know the game is tonight. You know, that's about as far as I know. But I am a baseball, football, and hockey enthusiastic. So, you know, college basketball, I assume every time I used to see it was always UConn that was always winning. But
okay. What is your undergrad? Like, where'd you go undergrad?
I went to St. Joseph's University out on Long Island.
Okay, interesting. Okay, very nice. Okay. Any NHL or NBA team you follow?
NHL is the Rangers and the NBA is the Knicks.
Okay, interesting. Big Devil fan, big Laker fan. We'll see. I don't expect a lot out of the Lakers this year, especially with Luka and Austin Reeves out indefinitely. So another summer for me without a championship. We'll see. Obviously, hockey, big Devil fan. Both teams are really, I think, in a rebuild stage, right? I mean, the Rangers, Devils, they look good early on. And after the Olympics, it just seemed like the Devils just kind of went south. And Jack Hughes needs some help moving forward. But we'll see what happens with those two franchises. Obviously, very, very big fan bases in the area. You mentioned you have 3 sons in the household. Is it?
Yep, 3 sons in the household and 1 that's grown up out of the house.
Okay, great. So is it a DC household or a Marvel household when it comes to Marvel movies or DC movies or comics?
I would say it is my boys are fanatics when it comes to Superman. So,
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so DC.
Yep.
What did they think of the new Superman, the reboot with James Gunn? Did they like it?
I think we've seen that 97 times at this point. You know, my boys are one just turned 10, the other one is turning 7 next week, and the other one is 8. So, yes, when we watch a movie once, we watch it in reruns, just like their actual favorite movie. Believe it or not, it's actually Maverick. So we watched it about 4,000 times now.
Well, Michael, I mean, not to date myself here, but I mean, I grew up watching Christopher Reeve and certainly loved Gene Hackman. You know, great Superman, great Lex Luthor. Obviously, this new Superman is not for people like me. It's for a different audience, different demographic. It's much more centric towards the comic. I remember talking with my dad about Superman, and he was like, wait a minute, like there's no dog. I'm like, well, if you read the comics, yes, there is. And if you read the comics, these characters exist. So listen, I think DC under this James Gunn administration is looking to a different demographic, different viewers, different fans, and that's who they're catering to. Not to say that, listen, I love Christopher Reeve. I love Gene Hackman. Certainly liked Henry Cavill. But it's a very different Superman now. And I think we'll see moving forward how the next Superman movie turns out coming up in 2028. Favorite American president and why?
I would have to say my favorite American president, I would have to say is Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
You know, I mean, that's when I was living, you know, so that's my, he was my biggest impression. I was born in 1978, so one of my first memories of really politics was the tear that wall down and the Berlin Wall coming down. That was one of my first real memories in life of the political environment, and how the country was, and his mentality towards Republican conservative views, and his mentality of, if anyone says I'm here from the government, I'm here to help, that's a problem in itself, the understanding of limited government at that point, and that he changed at one point. He was not always a Republican, when he was at that down in, down when he was an actor, so, he's definitely by far one of my favorites. And I would say history-wise, though, I don't see how anyone could argue with Abraham Lincoln, what he went through. I actually just brought my boys down to, when I got off active duty orders a couple of weeks ago. I just got off active duty orders a couple of weeks ago. And the first place that I brought them down to Washington, D.C. We went to Ford Theater while we were down there, on top of seeing the Constitution and stuff like that. And what he was going through during the time of the country, and his biggest message was unity after the war, saying these are going to be our brothers and sisters after the Civil War. We need to bring this country together. Very powerful. He had the emotional intelligence to understand the role that he was in at the time, Abraham Lincoln, and what he was fighting for.
Well said there. My favorite American president, Teddy Roosevelt, certainly leading the country during a very, very difficult time, and his leadership and wisdom is something that I always look fondly upon when it comes to Teddy Roosevelt, for sure. But good answers there. Michael, again, I really appreciate your time coming on here, talking about your campaign, talking about what separates you from other candidates in the field. I really appreciate your belief in my brand of fearless independent journalism, and coming on and having a conversation in a time when it's hard to have conversations. It's such a polarizing tribal political climate we're living in, but it's important to have these conversations, especially during election season. I do want to thank you for your time. I'll give you the last word here tonight on Real Talk.
I appreciate you. Go visit www.michaelmcguireforcongress.com. Link to our social medias. Ask me any questions you want. And very important, early voting started today on the congressional district on our special election. Go out there and vote for Joe Hathaway. Go support him. We need that race. We need to make a statement. This could be a statement for the November election, because there'll be another election in that district in November. Let's make a statement. Let's show them that Republicans are here and we are not going to give up the House, and make a statement that it's a mandate against socialism. We cannot do it here in New Jersey. We need to make New Jersey affordable again, and we need to make it to the place that everybody wants to stay and live and have their grandchildren in.
Well said there, folks. He is Michael McGuire, running in the 3rd Congressional District, all the way down in Southwest, well, parts of like Central Jersey as well, in the 3rd Congressional District there. Our guest tonight here on Real Talk. Folks, you have options in CD3 coming up in the primary. Michael McGuire is one of them. I want to thank him for his time tonight. Michael, best of luck to you. Again, it's April, but we have May next month. Happy Memorial Day. Certainly coming up in June. Happy Father's Day. Best of luck to you during this primary. And should you win in June, I definitely want to have you back on later on this summer to talk about the campaign going into November. Fair enough?
Fair enough, Fernando, and I appreciate your time, and it has been an absolute privilege and honor to be on your show. Thank you so much.
That's really kind of you. I appreciate it. Folks, he's Michael McGuire, running in NJCD3 here in New Jersey, coming up in the June primary. Michael, have a great night. Thank you for your time, and thank you for supporting Real Talk with Jersey First TV. Thanks again, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Folks, good stuff there with our guest tonight, Michael McGuire, running in the 3rd Congressional District. And a special program, we will have other NJCD3 candidates on the show in the coming weeks. You want to stick around for that. Certainly, I'll be talking about these topics and what's most important during this election cycle, better than anybody in Garden State Media. And certainly, we appreciate you making this a part of your Monday night viewing, as I'll be talking to candidates all throughout the next few weeks here during the spring, leading up to the June primary. So again, you always want to keep it here every Monday night for Real Talk, as we'll be talking about what's going on during election 2026. Folks, it's 7:10 here on the East Coast. We appreciate you making this a part of your Monday night viewing. And I can't say it enough. Like, comment, and share tonight's episode here on the show. It really helps the show grow and show your support for fearless independent media, which is what we bring you every single week here, right there, with Real Talk on Jersey First TV. Folks, you know what time it is? It's time for final thoughts. And folks, I've been talking about this since the inception of this program, which, by the way, folks, coming up in June, God willing, will be 6 years on the air with Real Talk. When we debuted in June 1st in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic, as we were home, locked down unnecessarily, as we've all come to learn. 6 years later, Real Talk continues to be your leader for trustworthy opinion journalism, and quite frankly, the leader in fearless independent media. Don't be fooled, folks, by imitators who are trying to be independent journalists. Now, folks, we're leading the way. We set the standard here on Jersey First TV. But I've talked about it repeatedly on this program, folks. There are plenty of bad actors during this election season and talk about everything that is New Jersey. Whether it's horrible activists like Antoinette Miles with the New Jersey Working Families Party, whether it's Amy Torres, who I've just learned is not really taking care of herself lately. So if someone's not summer ready, it's certainly Amy Torres. So ouch, from what I'm hearing. But obviously activists like this do us a disservice every day, folks. As well as do nothing partisan hacks masquerading as journalists. So we all know who they are, folks, in New Jersey, whether it's Tom Moran, whether it's Alan Steinberg, whether it's Chucky, Charles Style, whether it's Matt Friedman, all right, whether it's John Van Vliet, whether it's like useless government employees earning six figures and doing nothing but virtue signaling on their social media, like Maria Rodriguez from Montclair State University. Or equally as useless elected officials like Ravi Bala and Katie Brennan and Joe Quintero. Folks, as the weather's getting warmer, trust me, you'll see Joe Quintero roaming the streets in Hoboken. Don't you worry. Or other useless government electeds like Phil Cohen, who I'm sure I'll run into at the Hoboken Arts and Crafts Festival coming up on Sunday, May 17th. My birthday, coincidentally. And trust me, folks, you can't miss Phil Cohen when you see him. I mean, you can't miss his nose. You can see it like a few blocks away. There are other useless women in New Jersey, like Kayla Burrell, Lauren Albrecht, Patty Rosenstein. But when I think about useless, and especially in today's media apparatus, folks, let's be very honest, there's a plethora of those to pick from. But one that stands out for me, obviously, as you all know, is Uncle Dave, David Cruz, who now is trying to make it as an independent journalist. Who are you fooling, David? You're still the same partisan hack you were when you were on NJTV, NJPBS, and NJ Spotlight News. Okay? But what I think is really rich by Uncle Dave, okay, is somehow, well, we'll get to Uncle Dave in a minute. We'll get to this useless idiot in a minute. But what's interesting about Uncle Dave is somehow having individuals from nonprofits that are looking to provide assistance for journalism, right? And you can see that there, obviously. Last week, Uncle Dave on his Twitter page talked about the deadline for bids to run our public media system is coming up. Here's a point of view on what it should and shouldn't include. Of course, he's reaching out to those in Trenton that are going to have a big say about the state budget and what money should go towards funding public media. So, of course, Uncle Dave is desperate to reach out to Governor Sherrill, State Senator Zwicker, State Senate President Nicholas Katari, and, of course, Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin. But what I find is interesting about Uncle Dave, again, is he's looking for help in Trenton to help rescue an apparatus that he had a significant role in destroying to begin with. Now, Uncle Dave won't tell you that, because that would require Uncle Dave to have, wait for it, that pesky four-syllable word that Uncle Dave struggles, among other words, because, Uncle Dave isn't the brightest bulb in the pack, as you know what I'm saying, right? But it's that four-syllable word Uncle Dave struggles with, integrity. So, imagínate, Uncle Dave being at home, right, bitching and moaning about we have to save public media. No, motherfucker, you had an integral role in destroying our faith in public media. When for decades you were nothing but a partisan hack. You did everything you possibly could to ruin media. And now somehow you're asking for a handout to help come rescue media? Who the fuck are you kidding, David? Like, you have to be a special kind of stupid and gullible to think that Uncle Dave wasn't responsible for the predicament that we're in when it comes to public media. And let's be fair, Uncle Dave isn't the only person responsible. Okay? And we'll hear his virtue signaling and his sort of cries for help in this segment here, but it has to make you laugh, folks. When Uncle Dave somehow wants you to believe that public media needs rescuing. It does, but not rescuing people like David Cruz.
Public television programming services contract held by WNET expires on June 30th. And we see that as an opportunity to rethink public media writ large in New Jersey. How do you take TV, radio, local news, and other content providers, as you know, there are many now, between podcasts like your own and other people doing different...
A shitty podcast. And what's interesting about David Cruz, too, is this guy had the audacity, or has the audacity, to shit on people who podcast, who somehow, that wasn't journalism back then when Uncle Dave had a nice little comfortable seat at the table at NJPBS, at NJTV, at NJ Spotlight News. He would look down on podcasting. He would look down on independent journalists because, oh, those aren't real journalists. Those weren't people that went to undergrad and studied journalism or communications, started writing for the local paper, and then somehow came up the right way in the eyes of David Cruz. No, David, very much like you're the dinosaur I keep talking about. Journalism has changed. Media has changed. I'm still the only consistent podcaster in Hudson County for going on 10 years now. It's certainly not a platform you ever respected, but I wasn't looking for your respect because I get numbers that you dream of getting. More on that later, right? But here's what's interesting. Appealing to the masses somehow to try to trick you into believing that somehow public media needs rescuing. That's true. But what helped destroy public media are people like David Cruz. Let's continue here.
Content production around the state. How do you combine all that into a broad-based public media ecosystem?
And different modes of consumption.
Yes.
I mean, we were talking about Jersey City as an example. I've been doing some work covering city.
Doing some work. Since when does this lazy motherfucker do work? I mean, let's be honest about David Cruz, folks. One of the laziest motherfuckers I know in media. I mean, to try to fool us into thinking he's doing any work, come on. Esto un vago, esto un huevón. Give me a break.
Hall. And there are actually 4 or 5 or 6 reporters covering, but they represent small websites.
Yes, they do.
Some are on the opinion side more than others, but it also is a lot of young people. You don't have a lot of grizzled old veterans.
What opinion-based sites are you talking about, David? Again, folks, this is what makes David Cruz infuriating to sort of endure. When I think of news sites in Hudson County, I think of what I would argue is the leader in Hudson County news, and that's the Hudson County View, with my good friend, John Robert Highness, not just a member of the Pinnacle, but a fellow Rutgers alumnus and also the editor-in-chief. What is opinion-based? Why? Because he publishes op-eds? Folks, when we talk about news in Hudson County specifically, which is what Uncle Dave is concerned about, okay, it doesn't get as neutral and objective as the Hudson County View. Okay, John Highness and his staff, which include Dan Israel, Dan Aloa, and other freelancers that come and go with Hudson County View, are reporting the news. There's a fundamental difference in reporting the news, which is what they've been doing. And John's been doing it really, really well for more than 10 years, since he started the Hudson County View in 2014. So I don't know what opinion sites he's talking about. Hudson County TV, which again, that's where I broke into this business with. That's not opinion based. That's just straight news reporting with Jeff Henning. You have the Jersey City Times with Aaron Morrill and the staff there. Now, do they publish op-eds? Sure. They publish mine, just like the Hudson County View publishes mine, just like the Hudson County Chronicles. Now, Hudson County Chronicles with Bruce Alston, the publisher, that's a little more opinion-based, sure. But by and large, when we talk about the news sites in Hudson County reporting news, it's the Hudson County View, it's the Jersey City Times, certainly HudPost with its editor, James De Los Santos. Okay? They're not publishing op-eds at all. I would know. You have the tap-intos in Jersey City and Bayonne and Hoboken. You have the patches. But the idea that there's this weird or large overlap of opinion sites, that's just not true. But again, it's Uncle Dave being his usual deceitful self. Well, let's continue with the bullshit.
Out there anymore. So that's the other challenge, right? Keeping the pipeline of good journalists going and trained.
That's part of the charge from the legislature in the original statute, was for us to work on the pipeline.
And by the way, folks, if you haven't had a chance, check out the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium, a great nonprofit that is dedicated to trying to uplift public media in New Jersey at a time when it's almost on life support. And back to a point that David Cruz mentioned before about good journalists. Dave, you wouldn't know what that is because you were never one to begin with. And the reason we've seen the erosion of journalism in Hudson County, for example, in terms of print newspapers, folks, we had the Jersey Journal in existence for over 120 years. But in recent years, what happened to the Jersey Journal? It became a partisan rag under the auspices of its editor, Ron Zettlinger. And I would argue that the straw that broke the camel's back is, for years, trash like Ron Zettlinger would report on the interim president of New Jersey City University, Andres Acebo, and did nothing but harass this young man. But for years, when his predecessor, Dr. Sue Henderson, was running New Jersey City University into the ground, not a peep out of David Cruz, not a peep out of Ron Zettlinger, not a peep out of Tom Moran with NJ.com or the Star Ledger. Not a peep out of the Hudson Reporter, per se. And that woman nearly destroyed NJCU, but you would think that that should have been reported on. And you know who was the only journalist reporting on it? Fernando Uribe. Okay? You think lazy, useless motherfuckers like David Cruz and Tom Moran and Ron Zettlinger and Josh Rosario and Terry West, you think they did any work to help preserve journalism? To really report on what's going on? Of course not. Because they're useless. And now David Cruz, after, again, contributing to the decline of journalism, now wants his handout. Que milagro. A lazy motherfucker like David Cruz, que tiene la mano ahí, que quiere algo. Really? David, come on, bro. It's embarrassing. You should be ashamed of yourself. But then again, that would require you to have shame to begin with. And looking the way you look, you clearly have no shame. But let's continue on with this bullshit here.
And so we have programs at the high school level, community college level, and we do university internships. So we are working hard to build the public media pipeline here in the state.
So give me some bullet points that you took away after you read the thing.
So this is a once in a generation opportunity, as I said, for taking advantage of rethinking public media writ large in the state.
Because of so many platforms.
Yes, across platforms
yeah.
of social media, podcast, YouTube, Facebook, X, TikTok, etc. And most,
which, by the way, for years, people like David Cruz, Tom Moran, Ron Zettlinger, and the rest of this useless bunch would denounce and minimize. And now suddenly, because David Cruz needs a job or needs money, now somehow he wants to rescue the very platforms he used to shit on. No, David, kiss my ass. Hopefully you don't get the benefit from this. And if you do, I'm going to make sure to call you out on your bullshit, because for years, all you did was shit on podcasting and think it's not real journalism. You know what isn't real journalism? David Cruz, who now is attempting to become an independent journalist. Bullshit. Okay? That's the best way to summarize the brand that Uncle Dave is trying to live under. Folks, don't buy it. But let's let this good gentleman here continue.
Probably the most important point out of this is we really need to have public support continue for this kind of a broad-based media enterprise.
Yeah.
There's public dollars going into the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium, and historically, until 2010, there were public dollars going into public television.
That's a real journalist. Michael Aaron, who I had the privilege of participating with Reporters Roundtable on multiple occasions in the past. And Michael, I miss you and love you. And you had an enormous influence on me and motivated me to become the best journalist I possibly can. You set the standard, Michael. God rest your soul. And a lot of journalists should try to follow the blueprint that Michael Aaron left us.
And I think if we are able, given that we are one of 2 states in the nation without a commercial television station, if we're able to take advantage of this moment to get out from under the shadows of New York City and Philadelphia media outlets that owned and controlled the news that comes to New Jersey, we should take advantage of that, but we have to do it the only way we can do it is with that public support supplemented by sponsorships, memberships, advertising, the sorts of things that have historically underpinned some of New Jersey television, but not enough to make a robust operation statewide.
Yeah, and folks, and he's absolutely right about that. But guess what? Guess what is also important? Guess what is also important? Is making sure that we are trusting the right people in media, not propagandists, not virtue signalers, okay? Like David Cruz and Tom Moran and others that still are trying to get some oxygen in our media echo chamber. Folks, don't buy it. Okay? I've said it before and I'll say it again. People like David Cruz and Tom Moran and others, Alan Steinberg, you name it, folks, they're dinosaurs in this business. They shouldn't have any opportunity to benefit from anything that the New Jersey Information Consortium is trying to at least help get done here in the state. Because it's these people that help kill journalism in New Jersey. Not people like me, people like David Cruz. And yet this motherfucker has the audacity to sit there, not cry poverty, but somehow sing this sob song about, oh, we need to restore public media. The public deserves it. You're right, David. That's the only thing you're right about. New Jerseyans deserve a good public media, but you're not part of it. You haven't been a part of it in a long time. You helped kill public media. You and the rest of the assholes like Tom Moran, Ron Zelinger, and others. Now we have some, not necessarily independent news sites, but we have state-run news sites. We have Politico. And again, shout out to its editor-in-chief, Dustin Rassiopi, who does a wonderful job in overseeing Politico New Jersey. Not so much the useless assholes like Matt Freeman working for him, because again, all the guy cares about is smoking weed. And publishes once a week on the Playbook, which, let's be honest, folks, who reads that bullshit? Anybody who reads any good newsletters every Monday are either reading the Morning Monitor with Terrence McDonald from the New Jersey Monitor or the Hudson County View with John Hines. Okay? But I just think it is absolutely rich for someone like David Cruz, who played an integral role in killing journalism, in killing public trust in media, to now turn around and think that he wants to be one of its saviors. Bullshit. Don't buy it, folks. Okay? David Cruz is lying to you. He's been lying to you for years, but now he's lying to you even more because somehow he wants you to think that he wants to be one of the rescuers. Folks, it's like the boat that's sinking. You're wondering, how did it sink? Well, I mean, if David Cruz is sitting on a boat, you know why it's sinking metaphysically. But symbolically, when it comes to leaking water and why journalism has been dying in New Jersey and why New Jerseyans don't trust media, folks, look no further than this come mierda, who's crying about, oh, Media needs to be rescued. No, David, it needs to be rescued from you because you helped kill it. When it comes to clowns like David Cruz, folks, the best way to describe him, simply.
No. Show. You're a loser. Clown. You're a loser. Show. You're a Say it with me, Michael. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. It's a clown show.
I mean, folks, that's what it is. I mean, we have to sort of look at this and be intellectually honest. We can't take taking people like David Cruz seriously, talking about rescuing media. Yeah, public media needs rescuing. It also needs rescuing from David Cruz. Folks, speaking about rescuing during this election cycle, and when we go from one useless human to another, let's talk about a useless woman like Jay Lassiter. And again, folks, during this election season, we have candidates running for office, especially in the 11th Congressional District. And it's not so much even so the fact that Ana Mejia is a dangerous candidate, but it says a lot about who endorses people like Ana Mejia. Okay? People like Jay Lassiter, who somehow wants you to think that he understands the plight of the regular New Jersey voter or the New Jersey resident. A woman who sits at home with no job, living off his husband's money, with 7 cats, smokes weed all day, but somehow Jay Lassiter wants you to believe that he has the pulse of a regular New Jersey voter. And you can just look at his Twitter and some of sort of like the more blasphemous things he writes on Twitter, talking about Joe Hathaway, a noble guy running for the House of Representatives. Okay, check this out. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, this guy voted to send a pedophile rapist to the White House. Now, again, folks, people like Jay Lassiter. I mean, you want to talk about useless motherfuckers like David Cruz. Folks, this guy's as useless as well. Only because of the fact that somehow Jay Lassiter thinks he's relevant in our political climate. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know about any pedophile or rapist in the White House. What was that energy, Jay, when Bill Clinton, who we know, right? And it's shown and it's obvious when it comes to files being redacted and files being out there for public consumption, not a peep about Bill Clinton, but your fixation with Donald Trump. Folks, if you think about Trump derangement syndrome, you think about Jay Lassiter. Okay. I mean, if I were Donald Trump, if I were the president, I would sue Jay Lassiter. Not that he has a nickel to his name. I mean, he would just sue his husband. But these are the people openly advocating as a surrogate for socialists like Ana Mejia. Blatant anti-Semites too. Right? And again, here we go. We don't condition aid for our allies. Sounds like a blank check to a foreign country committing genocide. Issuing blank checks. Folks, Jay Lassiter is the same useless idiot who was more than happy for us to send our tax dollars to Ukraine. Not a peep from Jay Lassiter, though. Right? Here's a good line. He sounds good at first, but you quickly realize he's another bootlicker who voted 3 times to send a pedophile rapist to the White House. Interesting about Jay Lassiter talking about bootlicking. Okay. And I get it, Jay. You have all this time at home. You're sitting there playing with your dick and others in the house, probably. You know, and I get it. You have a lot of time on your hands between smoking weed, feeding your cats, and let's be honest, it's the only pussy that really can stand to be near you. But folks, as equally bad as Ana Mejia is when it comes to her candidacy, it's surrogates like Jay Lassiter that do her a disservice because, folks, if I was running for office, the last person I would want ever supporting me are useless women like Jay Lassiter. But somehow Jay thinks he's a relevant person in today's media echo chamber. He's not. He wants you to think he is, but he's not. And he'll shit on conservatives like myself and Matt Rooney and others who just want good candidates, who want good values, who want common sense policies and positions. But no, folks. Yeah. That's so much to ask. That's so much critical thinking for women like Jay Lassiter, right? And again, just like we talk about clowns in our political climate, especially in our media apparatus, folks, when we talk about clowns, yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, yeah.
No. You're still a loser. Clown show. You're a Mets fan. Say it with me, Mike. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. Clown show. It's a clown show.
I mean, folks, again, these are the surrogates trying to make you believe who are good candidates and who are not. I think it's clear in the 11th Congressional District during the upcoming special election on April 16th that Joe Hathaway's clearly the better candidate. He's not anti-Semite. He's not a socialist. He's a dad who's governed and understands economics and biology and other things and not coddling the illegals. But don't say that to women like Jay Lassiter. No, he'd rather virtue signal. Let's be honest. If he's not smoking weed, and again, maybe when you've seen me show videos of him, I mean, I know maybe you don't recognize him because he has something in his mouth. But then again, when doesn't Jay Lassiter have something in his mouth? Kind of makes you wonder, right? Yeah. I'd be careful about having surrogates like Jay Lassiter, folks. If I'm running for office, last people I want are women like Jay Lassiter endorsing me. Not a good look. When it comes to Jay Lassiter, when is it ever a good look? And those are my final thoughts. Folks, before we call it a night here, a special comment, and what a surprise. Month of March, 110,000 viewers and counting. Across Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. And again, I want to thank all of you that make it possible, that tune in. And sure, there's a small amount of haters out there, especially here in Hudson County, like useless attorneys and parking attendants. And I get it. You don't have much going on other than going home to your ugly wives and children. I get it. Or other virtue signalers in Hudson County or throughout New Jersey that tune in. Again, it's not even so much family and friends and colleagues that tune in. And I love you for supporting me. But it's also the haters. So I have to love you too because you still tune in every single week. So on behalf of the staff here and the production crew at Jersey First TV, again, I want to thank you for making the month of March in 2026 yet another successful month here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. Folks, again, I'm not the most humble guy in the world, but I'm humbled by your support. It's why I work so hard to bring you fearless, independent media every single week with interesting interviews, engaging conversations, and insightful commentary that you won't see anywhere else. Trust me, you won't. And while there are some people trying to be independent media, no, folks, I'm setting the standard on independent media. So I want to thank you for your support here on Jersey First TV. That's our show for this week, folks. Once again, I want to thank Michael McGuire, running in the 3rd Congressional District during the upcoming Republican primary in June, for his time tonight. Appreciate you tuning in here. And again, folks, like, comment, and share the episode. I really appreciate it. It helps the show grow. And again, it's the reason this show gets good organic traffic. It's because of all of you that tune in every single Monday night. Of course, check your local listing. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. Of course, follow us on Instagram and X. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and check us out on SoundCloud and Spotify. You can check out all the great episodes and content brought to you by Jersey First TV. Always remember, folks, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always real talk here on the Jersey First Television Network. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I am the generational talent in Garden State Media, and certainly your leader for trustworthy opinion journalism. That's right, folks. It's me, Fernando Uribe, saying so long. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, thanks for stopping by. And folks, again, I can't say enough. Like, comment, and share tonight's episode. It helps the show grow and show your support for fearless, independent journalism brought to you by Real Talk here on Jersey First TV. Folks, have a great rest of your week. Please party responsibly, and I'll see you next Monday night here for the latest edition of Real Talk on Jersey First TV. Have a great night, everyone.